Bakumatsu. The end of the Tokugawa shogunate was about 30 to 40 years before the Tokugawa Edo shogunate transferred power to the imperial court due to the Teisei Hoken, 1867. At the time of internal and external illness, there are disagreements among researchers as to whether the beginning of the late Tokugawa period should be set at the opening of the country 1854, or the reform of Tenpo 1841-43 the night before. In either case, the structural crisis of the Bakuan system was grasped as internal and external illness, under the circumstances where it had to be included in the world history in which the Western powers appeared, which became particularly remarkable in the 19th century. It was also a time when the government was struggling to deal with it, and the shogunate's ability to maintain the government showed its limits despite the desperate efforts of the parties, and it was also a time when trying to reinforce it eventually resulted in the loss of the government. However, if we keep in mind to respond to the structural crisis domestically, the latter view will be used, and if we emphasize the international conditions that have come directly into the country due to the opening of the country, the former view will be used. In any case, it was a time when the structural crisis of the Bakuan system became aware of the political crisis of the shogunate, and the international opportunity by the opening of the country promoted the political crisis. Conflict over policy. Therefore, as a way of responding, various policies aimed at concentrating the power of the Bakuan system were launched as reform politics. That is why the Tenpo reforms tend to be more absolutist than the Kyoho and Kansei reforms. However, under the political situation at that time, which was perceived as internal and external illness, the conflict between the shogunate and the opposition to it became fierce in the form of political disputes after the opening of the country. This period was also a period of labor pains in the process of leading the dismantling of the Bakuan system nation and the beginning of the birth of modern Japan. Faced with domestic and international crises, the political challenges that had to be resolved were to determine the treaty charter over the opening of the country and the stepchildren of the 13th shogun. As shown in the Tenpo reforms, there is a tendency to further strengthen the direction of dictatorship by the shogun, centered on the shogun, and to change such dictatorship, insist on a coalition government with the male feudal clan, and as a symbol of it, the imperial court. There were two positions to take out. It involved a feud between the Nanki faction and the Hitotsubashi faction, and it became a political dispute involving the shogunate, the imperial court, the feudal lords, and the samurai. It also encouraged the formation of the shogunate authorities, who had no choice but to forcibly open the country, and the Joi faction, which opposes the opening of the country. In particular, the dictatorship of the shogunate against the backdrop of the faction Hitotsubashi faction, who is trying to walk the Kabu-Gatai line with Yoshinobu Ichihashi, who had a high hearing of wisdom, and the power of the conservative Fudai daimyo. As a result of the conflict with the line Nanki faction that is trying to strengthen the situation, Naosuke, who takes the latter position, was inaugurated as the elder. This changed the political situation rapidly. Kifuku Yoshitomi entered from the Kishu family as the successor to the 13th shogunate Ieyasu, and after the death of the family, he became the 14th shogunate Iemochi. This spurred the conflict between the Nanki faction and the Hitotsubashi faction, and brought about the rise of the political line of the male feudal clan. In 1854, Ansei I Japan was opened by concluding the Treaty of Amity and Friendship under external pressure from the United States and others, but after that, it was forced to conclude a trade treaty under further international pressure. Rice Field. The shogunate sought approval from the imperial court in an attempt to sign this, but the imperial court refused to sign it. However, the shogunate signed the Japan-US Treaty of Amity and Commerce 1858 with diplomatic issues as the shogunate's sole discretion, as was customary in the early modern period. What's more, it put pressure on those who struggled with it. He ordered the influential lords of the Hitotsubashi faction to be reluctant, arrested many scholars, and finally killed them. The so-called Ansei Purge happened. In the midst of the crackdown on madness, treaties were signed with the 5 countries of the Netherlands, Russia, Great Britain, and France, following the United States. The Mito clan's priests, who were indignant at such severe measures by the shogunate, caused an assassination of the elder outside the Sakurada Gate, and the dictatorship system by the shogunate collapsed here. After that, Nobumasa Ando, an old man, needed to envision the absolutism of the shogunate's power. I proceeded. Then, in order to show the fruit, he welcomed Emperor Komai's younger sister, Kazunomiya, to Edo as the wife of shogunate Iemochi. Nobumasa was attacked outside the Sakashitaman incident by the Mito domain, who criticized such a blatant political marriage, and was injured and lost. The rise of the male clan. One of the male feudal lords, the Satsuma feudal clan, took the position of its own kabugatai, but in connection with the imperial court demanded reform of the shogunate government. The shogunate decided to appoint a Hitotsubashi faction daimyo, created a new official position, and used these people. This is Bunkyu's reform of the shogunate government, which uses Matsudaira Yoshinaga as the governor of the political affairs, Yoshinobu Tokugawa as the guardian of the shogun, and Matsudaira Katamori as the guardian of Kyoto. In Kyoto, which is the knee of the imperial court, the revered sect dominated, moved the imperial court, and urged the shogunate to carry out the order to expel Baba. The shogunate also decided that May 10, 1863, was the decisive action for the deceased, and ordered the feudal lords to respond. The Choshu clan put it into practice and bombarded foreign ships. In response, the four-country fleet of Britain, the United States, France, and the Netherlands attacked the Choshu clan and defeated the Choshu clan. In addition, the Choshu clan and other revered sect carried out Emperor Komai's prayer, Yamato Gyoko, and planned a defeat army, while both the Satsuma and Eizu clan were in the court. Contacted the Kabugatai lords, caused a political change on August 18, rejected the rushing lords such as Sanjo Sanetomi, and guarded the Choshu clan. I also solved my duty. In addition, he was forced to wipe out the noble sect inside and outside the imperial court. In the Choshu clan, the three elders led the soldiers to Tokyo in order to recover their power, and approached the Hamaguri Gomen, but they were repulsed by both the Satsuma and Eizu clan soldiers. The shogunate sent out an army to conquer Choshu on the charge of the Kinmen incident. In response, the Choshu clan succumbed and suppressed the revered factions within the clan. Great power advance. It was the United Kingdom, not the United States, that took the lead in Japan's trade after the opening of the country. After the opening of the country, the Joy movement continued to intensify, and the shogunate, which executed the opening of the country, was pushed by it to curb trade. Thus, the trade situation in Yokohama has deteriorated. The great powers believed that the cause was the Joy movement, and that the center of the movement was the Choshu clan. Due to the bombardment of foreign ships, the Shimonoseki bombardment by the Shikoku fleet occurred, and the Choshu clan suffered a defeat. In addition, the Satsuma domain was also exposed to the fire of British warships in retaliation for the Namamugi incident, and the power of modern weapons was witnessed. Recognizing the necessity of the Kaimai policy, these two feudal lords participate in the reverence movement and transform it into a defeat movement. In 1865, Kyo I, the great powers sent a fleet off the coast of Hyogo and put pressure on them, forcing a treaty charter as a means of expanding trade. In 1866, he obtained the royal charter of the treaty that revised the Ansei treaties. As a result, foreign countries have gained an advantage in terms of tariff rates when trading in Japan, and restrictions that impede free trade have been abolished. At least, it did not take the trade protectionism necessary for the absolutist power, but rather took a liberal policy, so domestically, it promoted further price increases and drastic changes, and further intensified social contradictions. It became the collapse of the shogunate. A strong unified government was required to deal with domestic and foreign crises, but there was a movement by France to put the shogunate at the center of it as before and to make it absurd, and the shogunate's movement. There was a position like Britain that saw the weakening and expected the government centered on the emperor. Regarding the Joy movement, in Satsuma and Choshu, the experience of the Shimonoseki War and the Satsue War made them realize the power of the great powers, and approached Britain to prepare a clearing policy. Especially in the Choshu clan, Shinsaku Takasugi raised soldiers against the background of the power of the Kahaitai and seized the real power of the clan, in opposition to the conservative upper ranks. He also worked with the wealthy farmers and village officials in the territory to turn the clan theory from reverence to debate. The shogunate ordered the Choshu clan to reduce its territory, but the Choshu clan did not respond, and the shogunate further declared the Second Choshu expedition. However, the Satsuma domain refused the shogunate's order to send troops. The following year, in 1866, a secret agreement was signed between the Choshu domain and the military alliance Sacho Alliance through the mediation of Ryoma Sakamoto of the Tosa domain. The army of the Choshu clan, which was able to unify the clan theory, was also receiving new training. The shogunate army lost everywhere, and Yamochi died suddenly in Osaka Castle, so the battle was stopped. Because the daimyo banned the export of rice grains to the Choshu expedition, the rise in rice prices was remarkable. In addition, we tried to increase the amount of money and taxes to raise war expenses. Under the terrible world, smashing occurred in Osaka and Edo, and ikisubyaku occurred in various places. Especially in 1867, the Iiya dance occurs around the Kiyosaka area. Under such circumstances, Satsuma, who collided with the shogunate after the conquest of Choshu, decided to join forces to defeat the armed forces. In the Tosa domain, the former feudal lord Toyoshi Yamauchi, who takes the position of the Kabu Gatai, submitted a white paper recommending the repatriation of the Teisei Hokan by controlling the frontier of the debate group, and the shogunate submitted a white paper in October 1867 Kyo 3. On the 14th, he submitted the above table of the Teisei Hokan to the imperial court the next day. Furthermore, after the submission of Yoshinobu's resignation from the shogunate October 24, the restoration of the royal government was declared on December 9. The shogunate was abolished in both name and reality, and the government moved to the imperial court.